Hello everybody, my name is Jos Voskuil and you probably know me as the Virtual Dutchman. And today I will be discussing the future of configuration management with three thought leaders in this area. Lisa Fenwick from CMStat, Max Gravel from Moog Inc. and Martijn Dullaart from ASML. Let's go through a quick introduction. Lisa, can you tell me something about yourself?
Yes, thank you very much. I have a degree in mechanical engineering. That's where I got my start doing all the wrong things in configuration management. And since then came on board with CMStat. I've been here since 1995. And in that time, I've been very fortunate to have several flavors of CM training. I'm certified through IPX, also CM PIC. I have data management training as well. I'm a CM certified assessor through CM PIC, and I'm also an adjunct instructor for them. The other thing that has been extremely helpful in my career with CMStat is involvement in standards writing committees, especially 649C. I was on that review team. And our product, by the way, our company, I guess I should say something about that as well, but we are providers of configuration management software and training.
Okay, interesting, and I see the overlap with the engineering world from the PLM domain. Huh? Okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
Max, what is your relation with us?
Well, thank you for having me first, and I'm very happy to be sharing this hour with all the great thought leader here. So, quick story about me: I'm an engineer by school, a master in engineering. I started my career in the aerospace, working for OEM as a system engineer in Bombardier back in Montreal, moved to Gulfstream, and this is where I started my journey into configuration management. I helped work at Gulfstream in the first ever certified aircraft in a model-based environment without drawing. After this, I joined IPX. I became a CM2P and did some services with many companies, different industries to help with their CM journey. And I lately, about just a few months back, I am very happy that I joined Moog as the model-based engineering manager, helping Moog towards their transformation to a model-based enterprise.
Okay, sounds interesting also the model-based topic, and we will zoom into that later. Martijn, yeah, we have met in person at least, living both in the Netherlands. Can you give us an introduction of yourself?
Yeah, I guess I'm the only person that actually met everybody online here in person.
Yes.
But I'm Martijn Dullaart. I work as a architect for configuration management at ASML. Before that, I worked at Philips, and that's also where my configuration management journey started in 2013. Trained by Ray Wozni into CM2, and then in the end certified all the way through. And that also ignited my passion for CM. And I also write about it on my blog mdux.net.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, you mentioned also the word passion about CM and passion about PLM. I always find it hard to explain it to others that you can have a passion for such topics. But as you all see, I think we have here three people with excellent skills in configuration management, all active in thinking about the future. And I think this is what we're going to explore in the upcoming 45 minutes. Lisa, I want to start with you. When we talk about configuration management, we also hear the term enterprise change management. Can you clarify those terms, and what do you mean by enterprise change management, and why and how should we implement it?
Yes. So configuration management discipline has traditionally been applied on a project-by-project basis. And even before model-based, it became clear that it really needs to be elevated to an enterprise level, because all of your communication systems, all of your infrastructure has to be able to play across partners and subcontractors and even your own internal organizations. So the move to enterprise CM even started before model-based, but because of the way our data is transforming these days, it's becoming more and more electronic, less document-based, less like the document world. All of configuration management is having to transform as well. And the move to model-based management really should not happen without configuration management doing the planning. So in the 5 pillars of CM, the first one is planning and management, and that is becoming even more crucial as time goes on. If you don't have someone who has this type of understanding, managing how it's going to be rolled out and developing, even in the standards committees, developing how those standards have to evolve and change to address what's going on now with model-based data. We have so many more types of information that are electronic, so many more relationships that need to be defined, and that's where we're all going. There's a lot of discussion in the SAE groups, in IEEE and others that we're involved in about how are we going to do this and how far down into the weeds does a standard go to define what has to happen in order to support this overall network. It's not a digital thread anymore. It's not even a fabric. It's definitely something more 3D than that, and the complexities are huge. So if we don't start by using configuration management as it's defined now, before as this transformation is happening, it's going to be too far down the road. It's going to be so difficult then. And we're already at that point. We're already past that point. These things are being implemented now, and we just have to react very quickly.
You're focusing on the pillar of planning as very important. Maybe Martijn or Max, coming from the field, what is your experience with that?
I can go real quick. My experience when as we went through the model-based journey is very rightly said. As we move to be more digital and model-based, is just our level of data becomes a lot more granular, right? Mm-hmm. And there's, as you mentioned, there start to be a lot more relationships. So CM is so important in 2 aspects. Is if the data is not well structured and these relationships are well established and there's no good planning before doing a change, the problem is you get into a mess and a chaos, and the change process become in a still because of too many relationships. So I absolutely agree with Lisa that planning and having CM structuring that data and keep control of, even though a data set is changing that may impact 100 other data set, do we want, as a business, do we need to, what's the decision? Do we want to impact and change all these other related, or which one of the other data set I want to put under the change and which one I don't? And it's all about planning. And it's really business decision. What makes sense from a business perspective? The enemy of perfection, right? That sometimes we want to be perfect and do everything, but I've seen it bring company to a standstill in their change process. So that would be my take. Lisa, I absolutely share your input there.
I think that it's even more complex than maybe you already mentioned, Max and Lisa. I think and I think you mentioned it already a little bit, Lisa. It's not about the planning of a change,
right?
Because that's relatively easy. It's the planning of the change upon change upon change upon change upon change. And what you see more and more is companies, the time to market becomes very short. There is a high pressure, concurrent engineering. You have to do things in parallel. And then suddenly we have changes upon changes, especially if you have complex products. And on those higher levels, there are so many changes coming together. If you don't plan that, you're lost. You don't know what you are going to be building at some point in the future. You don't have any control over that. And you don't have any idea what the real impact of those changes will be. And I think that is the important aspect of planning. Of course, you need to know the impact of every single change and you need to understand that also in the context of other changes to allow for a good plan. But planning is key to be able to execute and drive also the configuration that you want to build towards your operations, towards the factory and towards the field.
Agreed. And planning goes beyond planning for change. It really is the structures themselves have to be identified, the people, processes, and technology. You have to understand the roles, who should have access to what, security comes into play with that, data management, data rights, all comes into play with that. And those things, that whole ecosystem has to have thoughtful implementation so that you even have access to the information that you need to do that kind of impact assessment. So planning for change is just a small part of it. Configuration management planning takes into effect how am I going to establish my ecosystem? How am I going to protect the data that I'm working with? How am I going to protect the security of the information and make sure that it's available to the users? And do I have the right number of user licenses and bandwidth to get people the information they need? And are the systems compatible that you can see, especially with suppliers? ModelBased, I'm working with a company right now, and they had given me a list of all the tools in their system environment, and it's about 30 different tools they're using. The compatibility of those tools and the ability of users to access that information is a concern, making sure that's going to be able to be available to them to make these decisions.
In the past, we had the documents to come to a common information carrier. Now you want to connect the information from the tools directly or through standards. And if I think to the world of PLM, we also don't like planning in small and medium enterprises. We wait till the product is ready and then we create a baseline.
I always say configuration management goes against human nature. We just want to get out there and play in the sandbox.
And just one more, I know Martijn talked about the multiple concurrent change, but a lot what's happening too is I totally agree with concurrent change in a rapid, especially with complex product, but also what's happening with our products is they are becoming a lot more integrated. Everything as software now. And we're really in the era of the competitive advantage is becoming more on the software, right? The software and and the compatibility with hardware and being able we sell products that are more complex, more expensive, like cars that typically people keep longer. So we got to also think as part of the planning of all these dependencies, and it's not just production anymore. A lot before was really focused on I got to do a cut it in production, but now as part of planning, just a simple change can have so much compatibility and ramification. If I do that change in production, can I do that upgrade in service? Because my customers are expecting to keep that product longer and be able to upgrade it like your phone, right? So the enterprise, if we go back to enterprise-wide, it's enterprise-wide because there's a lot of expert domain to understand the relationship. But it's really also throughout the product life cycle. Not everybody makes a product that are throw in trash, but as soon as we have product with software, you got to look at it from manufacturing, from a supply chain, and also from a service, right? Because the customer, the real customer experience, right, is that service. How many times you got an upgrade and it doesn't work? How likely are you to come back and buy the same product again? Or how likely are you to use social media and say, don't buy this brand, right? And it's really, to me, also the focus is really moving towards service, right? Maintenance and managing change and planning it for the life of the product.
Yeah, there we see the similarity again with the PLM. PLM initially just a product definition environment, and we don't care about the customer, more or less. We push our products in the market, and now with connected products, with software, we have to be in touch and efficiently connected through to the field and the customer.
Yes, and we're seeing that with our customer base as well, that customers who used to just be the design, maybe manufacturer, they're definitely pushing out to that end of the operational end of the life cycle, like Max said.
And Martijn, of course, you with ASML, with your I would say almost engineering to order process, it's a kind of challenge, or not?
Yeah, well, it's not truly engineering to order, I would say. It is, but it is of course challenging, because I think we have a very unique way of developing products, in the sense that there's already very early involvement with our customers, very early on, trying even our machines, our prototypes actually, to develop their own processes for the next node. And I think that is, in comparison with aerospace, you will not let a customer fly your prototype that can barely get off the runway. And I think that's a very big difference. Our customers want those prototypes just to be able to develop a next node. But that also has, of course, challenges in the way we are developing products and trying to mature a product towards a kind of a mature product that we can produce in volume. Of course, and that's not the volume as in mass production, but
exactly, because aerospace and defense, they are I would say the initiators of configuration management. They have a big drive for that, and I think your industry and other industries are still somewhere on the edge of, are we going to use it and when and how? It's still not a popular topic, huh?
And I think that there's a very big difference from where we started with configuration management versus where, and at least I mentioned it, where the aerospace and then the defense industry started. They started from a project-based approach to CM. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of other companies and especially other industries never started from that perspective. But started much more already with an enterprise vision. I think at ASML we started much more with an enterprise vision of configuration management and not really from a project perspective. And sure, we have projects and deliver part of the designs, but that's more a way how we develop our products. That's not how we integrated CM in the organization.
Right. Yeah, so I'm coming now to you, Max. We're going to work on a model-based enterprise, and model-based is one of your favorite topics. Can you explain us something about what is the typical change from document-driven configuration management to model-based?
Yes, so let me start with, there's as many definitions of model-based as there are people on Earth. A lot of things that I hear is a lot of people today or companies associate model-based with 3D CAD. Right, model-based, and there's always that picture of that engine, right? Always 99% it's that engine, that digital twin, but it's a very inaccurate picture, because model-based goes way beyond the CAD. It's really changing the way people communicate, right? With data, author, create, and consume. So a very simple example of model-based, it can apply to everything. Like if we look at the way we were communicate as human, we were paper-based. We were sending envelope with a stamp, right? This was the paper-based way, and now we have email, we have Zoom, and who knows what's going to happen next with the metaverse. But as you understand, as these process, that the transformation from paper-based to model-based, think about the envelope that you used to send 3 days to your family, or the bit of VHS video that they would get, with now what we have. Do you understand how much process had to change? Now there's spam. We had to control security. There's all kinds of all process of communication have changed with it. So you could not. It's like a lot of companies also from model bases, they use their CAD, but they still want to bring the stamp. They want to exchange information, and they're not ready to let go of the stamp. We don't need that stamp anymore. There's other process. So high level, this is a misconfusion. What I hear is it's a bit of a confusion there. The other thing, when we go model-based. Now, why the importance of changing process is think about, it's just the data is different. Think about a document, which used to be a requirement. In model-based, that document is a set of data sets, right? It could be in a doors, or I'm not doors relationship. I am not trying to sell that software any mean, but it's just a list of different data set. And then your report is a report of that. So from a process perspective, you're not really managing a document. You're managing a data set. And you just want to make sure that when you do all these changes, you can go as granular as you want. But when you're going to release, your final product, you're going to make sure that your whole set of requirement match as a whole. So the CI is still the document, but from a change process, you're managing a lot more data. Same thing with the CAD. CAD-wise, people think it's the 3D model. I manage like the good old paperwork. The drawing was a part, right? You would manage it as a part list, and this is the only thing you could transfer is that part. Now with model-based, it's not just the 3D. There's a lot of information in the attributes, right? Your model is now as shape, your model as tolerance, your model as material, your model may have some notes to do all kinds of analysis. So companies that are embracing model-based, they have to understand that the data landscape, the granularity is changing. The relationship, as Lisa said, is growing. So if you're not removing the stamp, if you're not letting go of the stamp, you won't realize a lot of benefits, even though you're in a PLM. It's not just the tool. It's not going from PDM to PLM. You got to relook at your process. It's very important because you can actually make it better, just like with the email and the Zoom. Process have changed, but we wouldn't go back to the paper. We wouldn't go back to the envelope. So if the process changed, typically people don't want to come back. If process don't change, this is where chaos and lots of consultant, right? It's it's a lot of $1 million that have been lost and have to redo again. I've heard so many stories of failure of model-based or digital implementation, and most of them is just they didn't take the time to say why we did what we did before and now how are we going to adapt to this new environment.
So it's also directly in the point made by Lisa about planning. And I would add also to impact analysis. I think if you want to connect to CM and model-based, I think the biggest points where you have an impact is in impact analysis and planning, and not just for a change, but also across changes. Because what is now your deliverable? In the past, it was easy. The deliverable was the document. It was very clear what that contained. That was the black box that from a CM perspective, we didn't care what was inside of it. We just cared we had to deliver it. And it had to be reviewed, it had to be signed off, etc. That was all fine. But now everything in that box is exposed, and as Max said, in all kinds of nodes and smaller data sets and relationships. And the question now is, of course, are we now still managing that set of nodes and data sets and relationships, or do we also from a CM perspective need to go a level in more detail and start managing different kinds of data sets and different kinds of objects and manage that? And I think that's also where the discussion is taking place. What does that mean from a CM perspective? And I think when I have discussions about going model-based, let's say you go model-based in system engineering, where you start modeling your functions and your logical components and your physical components in all nitty-gritty nodes and the relationships and the requirements you can attach to it, which is all, I think, very good. And they have a very good idea how they can set up the initial structure of it, but how to process change and how to do impact analysis and how to plan all your changes against that and still link it back to the rest of the organization that in the end have to consume that information downstream.
Martijn, oh yeah, you were last minute on the... Maybe a question on that, Lisa. Do you see companies creating new processes for model-based, and that also include configuration management? Because Martijn says, yes, there are very model-based ways of development like system engineering, but is the CM guy also there? Do you see it in your customer base?
I do see it becoming more and more prevalent. I see configuration management itself being pulled up out of being subservient to engineering and really a service to engineering. I see that with our customers being pulled up more on an enterprise level. I see that happening slowly, but I definitely see that happening. So in a lot of organizations, quality was already at that level because of the importance of getting certification. And it is becoming more and more popular for companies to start to realize that CM is on that same level, and CM and quality go hand in hand, and these things just make logical sense.
Because who would be in the company the sponsors for CM? Quality, as you mentioned, others?
Oh, I think it should be, I personally think configuration management should be their own organization that reports right to upper management. Ideally, I don't see that very often, but ideally that's where it needs to be. And because we are talking about these complexities, these far-reaching implications of everything that's being done now, every bit of information is much more complex, and the life cycle, I'm seeing the life cycle even stretching out. Max talked about it being in the operations and the service phase. I also see configuration management being applied earlier on in the life cycle to the first interaction with the customer. All of those, the proposals, the estimating, all of that is configuration management now life cycle as well.
One note to that, as we talk about going model-based process, what I start to see, or a lot of what I see is the change process, the concept of form, right? The concept of managing change process with form. The change process also got to evolve to become a model-based change process, which is the objects, and it has its own sets of data set. You have to fight fire with fire, and I think I've seen it from my previous company. But a company will also realize that if you go model-based, you also have to upgrade your change process and let go the stamp and the form and slowly go to model-based change process. And I think companies are realizing it. And I think hopefully there'll be some improvement with the PLM vendor, and I'm actually the big PLM vendor today. I still see their out-of-the-box change process being document-based with form, and hopefully we'll see some serious improvement on that side of the PLM.
I think talking on behalf of the PLM vendors, the challenge they have is they have to serve the current business. And if the current business is document driven, if they don't support document driven, they won't make their business also. From the other hand, to implement the model-based future, it might be not a single system anymore. Also, it might be a collection of systems, and that might, reduce their market share. So there is also probably a challenge here.
And going enterprise-centric, as Lisa said, and Martin, a bigger question is really, does change management system belong in a PLM or ERP, or they should become another layer, right? Another layer on top of all these, an enterprise-wide platform, because does it even belong into PLM in the future? And I think this is going to be an interesting discussion where there's that model-based change process enterprise-wide that connects all the data of all the system. Where does that reside? I think it's an interesting question. I don't know, Lisa or Martin or
I think
Joseph.
I agree. It is if you look at the change process from a CM perspective, it is not about engineering only. It is not about engineering documentation only. You're not done when the document is done or when the data set is finished from a model-based perspective. You're done when the change is implemented in the factory or the upgrades have reached the field and you have completed the orders to upgrade the machines in the field. That is when you can close out your ticket, basically. You have to look at it from that holistic perspective, and that, from my perspective, I think change management, therefore, is an enterprise-wide process, and it's not just part of a specific pillar in the organization. How you implement that, of course, in which tool you implement that, I think the tool needs to be able to really connect to all these other different tools so that you can really manage that process from an end-to-end perspective.
Yeah, so Max already started to indicate that we have connected systems, or I even call them in my blog connected platforms. You have major platforms, and then a discipline will go through all the platforms and connect everything. First we had the buzzword digital thread, now it's surely coming into a digital web. And maybe, Martijn, you have been talking about the neural network of data. Can you tell something more about that, about your thoughts on that?
I think it was Max that actually coined the term neural web of data, but I think it is spot on. What is happening is that the data in an organization is everywhere, and it's not just in your organization. It is with your suppliers and even your design suppliers as well as your supply chain suppliers. And it all got connected, but it all has uses different objects with different kind of metadata, with different kind of relationships. And sometimes you have even within the same PLM tool, within the same organization, 2 times the same item that are representing, in one case, the engineering bill of material, in the other case, the manufacturing bill of material, because the current implementation doesn't support you to do that in one item with different views of different data sets related to it. But from a business perspective, those 2 items are still the same. And you still have to make sense of all of that information across the entire enterprise. And I think the challenge is that if you want to connect the data right, you also have to talk or look at it from a business data model perspective and understand how all these relationships and how all these objects are relating together. And then you really get a kind of a neural network in that sense, because then you start creating a knowledge graphs in that sense that are really rich and that are really powerful in the sense of how you can drive your decision making. And not just from a CM perspective, not just for making a decision about a change request to implement it or not, or to doing supporting in the impact analysis, but also in a sense of how you should change your master schedule and what the impact would be, and also on that more higher level in that sense. And I think that is going to be very transformative in the future.
But when I hear the term neural network, I think a little bit like the brain. The brain is also creating associations, and this is the way you, in the end, make decisions. But that takes a lot of time to learn and to create relations. And I somehow have the same feeling with configuration management. Managing all those relations, is this all manual work? Can we automate here? Or
I think you can automate a lot. I would say. I think I've seen examples where, for instance, based on certain data, you could generate a quality score. For instance, if you want to release information from a PLM system to an SAP to an ERP tool, then you could have a quality score about the data. Well, there was an impact analysis that said we're going to change A and B, and in the release package they have indeed put A and B, so the quality score is good. Then an automatic release can be done. But if, let's say, B is missing, then it says, well, maybe you need an audit analyst or a change analyst to support your release to understand why B is not there. And maybe it's a good reason. We cannot automate everything, but then we can, of course, ask somebody to jump in and make that decision for us.
Right. And even things like verification and audit, we talked about before, the ability to automate those processes as well. And there's going to be so much more of that needs to be done. You know, there are things configuration managers do that a lot of the rest of the community it's not visible to them. And some of those are the audits of the configuration management data itself, for an example. And those types of things can be automated when you have everything digitally. So there are some advantages to this big leap from the envelope and the stamp that Max talked about. It's a big transformation. It's a big way of changing our thinking, especially for those of us who have been brought up in the paper world, really. You know, but the advantages are it's so much quicker. You know, we email and we text people now and instant message them because it's so much quicker than sending something through snail mail. As we even call it snail mail, right? So speed is something that it can be gained from this. And even in the change processing, speed is going to be crucial because it needs to happen so much faster. And configuration management isn't against speed. Configuration management is really for the appropriate level of rigor where it belongs, but there's certainly no reason that with the proper planning and the proper oversights in place, like Martin was talking about, that the speed can't be gained as well.
Right. And you mentioned rigor, and that's often what the other side, the end user says, let me do my job, huh? And let the system solve my problems.
If I look at for instance, in the change process and the cycle times of all the steps in the change process, the biggest portion of the cycle time is still in the actual creation work and the review work of that creation work, which in my perspective is not really CM. That's still part of your development processes. And if you don't then take them out, then sure, there is still some cycle time left, but it is not comparable to the time you spend on the actual creation or updating of your data sets and the reviewing of it, which is, in my perspective, part of your development process.
And on that side of the neural network, to me, I think going model-based, we're going model-based and creating neural network. I think not just because we want it, it's because our products are also becoming a lot more complex, and what we're able to do, what human were able to comprehend, you know, with the document-centric and the part-list and a few relationship, it no longer works for this complexity. So to me, it's a necessary evil. If you want to have configuration control of your product as they get more integrated, more complex, you gotta have to start to build these relationships. I see the future as relationship. I see change management as becoming more graph database, right? The SQL, the old Oracle SQL server, I think won't be able, it's going to have also to transform. We're going to have to go think in graph. And I think the role of CM, obviously it's enterprise. I think the role will become an enterprise process, and CM will become the organization that's going to set up and define that neural network, and being able to manage this neural network with a good change process. So the business is still, as you said, Lisa, needs to be lean, but it has to be at the right level of rigor, because if it's anything products, there's so many relationship that the problem is we're going to start to get defects and recall, right, as the product gets. So you got to have that rigor to make sure your product is safe. But you got to have flexibility so you don't stall everything. So it's going to be an interesting challenge, and I think CM is it's I think it's for my generation, my kids, my next generation. This is going to be the role of CM to set up that infrastructure across the enterprise, but also I think the tools we have, the database, the way we link, I think is going to have to evolve also from the software vendor, which is it PLM, is it ERP? I think we need definitely something on top of all this to manage that. So that's my vision, or my feeling of where things are going with model-based at this point.
Yes, and I would like to say that I see the benefit of having CM outside of model tool itself. It needs to be, because there are multiple models, there are multiple tool sets being used anyway, but you can't limit what your product definition is based on what the development tools are limiting to you too. So you have to have a configuration management system that's able to pull in the true product structure, including environment variables that are things that are going to affect your product, not just the model itself or that product design, the physical design. So I see that also, the product structure will do that, growing and being, I guess, released from the limitations that we've had in the past of the design tools.
I think in our previous call we discussed that the technology is going to change. The graph databases are going to become important. Managing all type of relations between different entities is the future. But from the other hand, I think you also said at that time, but the methodology is not going to change so much from configuration management. The principles of configuration management will stay, and somebody has to set them. Do you see examples of where we can learn, where people can learn and experience the ways to the future? Maybe Martijn, you are closest to that or not?
So if you look at standards, let's put it like this. To me, there are two types of standards. One is the closed standard, which I call CM2, which has a lot of principles, and if you look at those principles through the last, let's say, 15 years, then there have been some small changes to those principles, but it's more in the wording than in the intent of the principles. Then, of course, you have open standards, like the SAE 649, REV-C, which is the latest, which, if you look at it in its development from the B revision to the C revision, already is starting to show some of the principles that were already mentioned in CM2 about an as-planned as a least baseline, which is not explicitly mentioned in the 649, but if you look at the graphics that they put in, there is already an initial step towards that kind of thinking. And I think the advantage of CM2 is that it is a proprietary standard and they can develop it with their own speed, and that helps. And they're very open to the feedback of the industries that work with IPX. That's also, I think, the disadvantage of an open standard. It takes a long time for those standards to change, and when they change, it's always looking back at the status quo, so to say, but not so much at looking forward. What do we need in the next decade? And that's where I think we're currently struggling with, is that model-based is challenging the way, especially fundamental aspects of CM, fundamental principles of CM, how to apply those. The 649 standard, I think it was released in 2019, the latest ref, if I'm not mistaken, in February 2019. It still will take a while before we get the next revision, which will be too late for us to understand what we need to do today to accommodate going model-based. So this is, I think, where we struggle. And that's why I think I like to partner with CM2 and IPX very much, because we have a very good relationship and discussion with also other industries. What do we need to change and how do we need to interpret the principles in this model-based context? Because it's more about the interpretation of the principles, not so much about challenging the principles, although there might be a change to one or two principles or a new principle. But if you look at it overall, there will be not that big of an impact from a principle perspective.
Okay, so you were talking about... You were talking about the pressure of time, and I look at the clock and we are also pressuring the time, and I think we could go on for another hour. In a way, we talk very technically. Now, if we talk to somebody who is interested in configuration management of the future, what would be your 1 or 2 or 3 liner advice? And then I'll start again with you, Lisa. You don't have so much time to think, but what would you advise to somebody?
I would advise, I always advise people new to configuration management to embrace configuration management training, formal training from these organizations. I think that's been invaluable to me in my career. The other thing I would say is participation in the standards writing. Like Martijn said, whichever ones you can, even if you feel you don't have a lot to offer, if you're practicing in the industry right now, you do. And that's the input that the standards need.
Exactly, I agree. Max?
Yeah, my 5 cents. If you want to know more, I think there's a good information on LinkedIn. Just MDux. Martin has very good blog. Jos, you have good blog. Try to get involved with committee. IPX is actually a very good source. But and also try to. I think what helped me tremendously from going to working when I work for IPX is to see a lot of different industries. Mm-hmm. It's very good sometimes to not only benchmark with you're in aerospace is aerospace, and I did learn a lot of things from other industries. So connect, go on LinkedIn, look at other industry, and I'll finish it. Is as you transform your process, just it's okay to remove the stamp, and a lot of people are always scared of removing something, like they're going to lose something. You got to be able to think again and ask the why and rethink your process. Standard, as they said, are typically a decade late. If you want to lead, you're going to understand the principle and use the why and talk to many people. There's a lot of people out there like you guys that can help.
Okay, I like removing the stamp. And, it's a nice term. Martijn?
I would like to reiterate, train, get the right training, because if you're new, then training helps, and it also can spark the interest that you need to, and the passion you need to follow up. But also, and it's one option, but there are also other communities out there. In IPX, we have the IPX Congress. Even we have committees, and to join committees, you don't need to be certified. So it's not necessarily that everybody needs to be certified to be a part of the IPX Congress. So to be a member, yes, you need to be certified, but joining committees and the working committees, depending on your interests, can always be accommodated without certification. So I would suggest look into that and make sure you look especially in LinkedIn and the various blogs out there on configuration management. Also CMStat regularly posts excellent blogs posts. So use that to increase your knowledge and start interaction with people that have already a lot of experience. But not just only in your own industry, also look outside, because there is so much to learn from other industries.
Right, and I think the most common point I hear is train, get educated. It's not something that just bubbles up from using technology. There needs to be a thinking behind, so it is a learning process. For that, I want to thank you for this 50 minutes of very insightful discussion for me, and I'm also continuously looking into this world, but for a lot of other people it might be the first meeting point with configuration management and PLM. I thank you for your time. It was a pleasure talking with you, and I hope to follow up in real life in the near future.
Thanks, Jos.
Thank you all.
Very much.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Happy holidays.